welcome to Master Debate, and I'm your host, Melissa Birnbaum, and today we're here to answer the latest viral question of, is water wet? On my left, we have Chelsea, who swears on her life savings that water is not wet. And to my right, we have Jasia, who would bet her firstborn child that water is in fact wet. So, Chelsea, we're gonna start with you. Can you tell the audience why you think you're right?
So water is not wet. It is just what we are feeling when water touches us, but the water itself is not actually what is wet. That is what I am feeling.
Okay. And Jasia, why do you think you're right?
Water is a liquid. If you immerse yourself in water, if it touches you, you are wet. Liquids are wet. And if you don't think water is wet, then what is dry water? It doesn't exist because water is wet. And when water dries, it evaporates. It's science.
Okay.
Except for, other than that, when you're underwater, you yourself are not wet, but when you leave the water, then you are wet. So technically, since when you're underwater, the water itself would not be wet because you're completely in the water.
But I've choked on water when I've been underwater. Like if you accidentally snort water, and you're definitely choking on a liquid. It's wet. And then you cough up a liquid. So in turn, water is wet, because by definition, it's like a moisture or a liquid. And if liquid isn't wet, then what's a liquid?
Okay, so a lot of people think that in order to properly answer this question, you have to have a solid definition of the word wet. So how would you define wet, Jasia?
When a liquid is on you. Because like whether it's water, whether it's juice, vodka, you're gonna be wet if it's on you.
Chelsea?
Well, wet is when a liquid touches a surface. And so the liquid itself is not wet until it comes into contact with a surface. So wet would be when liquid is on a surface.
So if water isn't wet, then what is water?
Water is a liquid.
But liquids are wet. Like you shower in a liquid, you drink liquid, you put liquid in your food.
So is water wet? So is fire burnt? No, fire burns stuff, liquid wet stuff.
Then what's fire though? There's not like a fire that exists that like doesn't burn you. Like fire's gonna burn you, water's
But
gonna
would you
get
say
you wet.
fire itself is burnt?
What does it even mean? Like, what is fire though then? I think that people like to complicate things and we should just keep it simple. Water is wet, fire burns things.
All right, so a lot of people think that water is not wet because it can't be dried. So what do you think about that, Chelsea?
Okay, that's fair because being wet is when you are wet, you can be dried. And so water can literally never, it's in itself, you can't dry the ocean because the ocean's not wet. You can't dry the entire ocean.
But the ocean is evaporating because what happens with water is that when it dries, it evaporates. That's how we have clouds, and that's why our lakes and our oceans are drying up because of the water and the pollution. They're evaporating because that's what water does when it's dry.
They're evaporating, but they're not wet. They're liquids.
But a liquid is wet. Like, what would you consider an ocean if it's not wet?
Water.
And what does water do?
Water itself is a vehicle to the wetting, but the water itself is not wet.
I have to disagree. I think water's wet. And I think people are complicating things. Water is wet. It gets you wet. It's what you use to clean yourself. Like you said earlier, I remember before the show, that is dirt dirty? Yes, it is dirty. Like, I don't know how you can tell me dirt is clean. It's dirty. Dirt's dirt.
But dirt
Fire's
itself is
fire.
not dirty. When it touches something, it makes the thing dirty, but dirt itself is not dirty.
Then what is it?
Dirt.
Okay, and Chelsea was saying before that when you're underwater, you're not wet until you leave the water. How do you feel about that, Jasia?
I think you are wet because when you're underwater, it's not like you're like, wow, I'm dry. You don't think that. Like if you're underwater, you can choke on water. You can drown yourself. Like if water isn't wet, what are you drowning yourself in? Air? No, you're drowning yourself in a liquid.
But you're completely submerged in the water, so you don't even know that you're wet.
You're telling me when you're underwater
you can't
that you
dry
don't feel wet?
You can't dry yourself underwater, and you want to dry yourself because you're wet. But when you're completely submerged in water, you don't know that you're wet.
I mean, if I'm like diving in an ocean, I'm gonna be like, I'm wet. I'm in water.
But you're not gonna try to dry yourself when you're underwater.
Because why would I do that?
Because
I'm
you're
gonna
not
take a
wet,
towel,
you're
'cause-
just in water.
But if I took a towel underwater, it would get wet.
Exactly.
Because water's wet.
No, because water is water, but then when you in the towel leave the water, then
But why
will
would
be
you dry
wet.
yourself when you're in water if you didn't
You
want to dry
wouldn't, because
yourself?
you're not wet underwater. You're wet when you leave the water. Then you would dry yourself.
Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today on Master Debatin', but be sure to tune in next time when we answer the questions that you've all been looking for the answers to.